Let's talk some trade scenarios as it pertains to the draft. I've heard some wild ones out there, and I think that we could actually do a little bit better with this, but we're going to talk about it. Well, welcome back to the podcast. My name is Greg, and this channel is the Washington Football Maniacs. This channel is dedicated to the fandom of the Washington Commanders. If you're down with that, make sure you have subscribed to this podcast. If you're on YouTube, make sure you also hit that notification bell so you won't miss any of the video releases. And in today's video, we want to talk about, quite frankly, trade scenarios that I've been seeing online, and specifically, is it actually a reality that the Washington Commanders could actually trade up to get Caleb Williams, or if they don't trade up, would they possibly trade to get Justin Fields? Or is the likely scenario that the Washington Commanders, if they're going to do any type of movement off of that second pick of the NFL draft, will they just basically trade back, pick up more draft picks, which honestly is more of something that I like to do, but I also understand the need for a quarterback. So it's very interesting. So the trade scenarios. Now, here's the thing. Ever since that we have hired Cliff Kingsbury, people are at a buzz because they feel like that automatically means that the Washington Commanders are going to make a move up to number one to get Caleb Williams. And, you know, me, I always love to play the devil's advocate because, you know, I'm looking at it like that doesn't necessarily mean anything. I mean, look at Kingsbury. Of course, he helped to develop Caleb Williams. He also helped to develop Patrick Mahomes. I almost said Patrick Ramsey. Patrick Mahomes and Johnny Manziel when he had a Heisman year at Texas Tech. That was at the hands of Cliff Kingsbury. So, having said all that, you know, people are automatically assuming since Kingsbury was at USC and was a big part in helping to develop Caleb Williams, that for sure that tips the hand of the Washington Commanders that they're going to be making moves to move up to that number one spot to draft Caleb Williams. I feel like, here's the thing, because that Kingsbury has been able to develop so many fantastic quarterbacks since his time coaching, that I don't believe that is such a necessary thing that the Washington Commanders move up to get Caleb Williams. In fact, Adam Schefter came out and kind of threw cold water on that scenario. You know, he feels that he just doesn't understand a situation where the Bears would not draft Caleb Williams. He feels that, if anything, the more likely scenario is that the Bears do draft Caleb Williams and then they trade Justin Fields, which honestly I think is probably going to be the most likely scenario. And if that's the case, then who do they trade Justin Fields to? Well, then you start to get a lot of people on social media that are at a buzz, and they're like, well, trade him to the Washington Commanders, and here's what I'm going to give up for him. And people are giving up a king's ransom to get Justin Fields, and I personally don't think it's necessarily going to take that much draft capital or even player capital in order to get Justin Fields. I think the Commanders have to play this right, and if they play it right, then they may not have to give up a lot if, in fact, they are interested in trading with the Chicago Bears for Justin Fields. Now, yeah, certainly they're going to have to give up likely a second round pick. They'll probably have to give up a first round pick, possibly, and maybe not. I mean, think about it. Dallas was able to trade, I believe, a third for Trey Lance, who was a former first round draft pick. So, of course, Trey Lance didn't really get as much playing time as Justin Fields. So that may be part of the issue there. There hasn't really been this thing that, oh, Justin Fields is a bust. I felt that Justin Fields was actually having a much better season this year than what he did in previous years. But the fact that Justin Fields, maybe many in Chicago feel like he hasn't lived up to his potential. And that possibly can be so, but at the same time, if that is the case, there's some questions surrounding that. Like, okay, if he is worth a first round draft pick, then why are you not keeping him and playing him? That is definitely something that I'm interested in finding out. Why don't you just keep him, develop him? I realize that he's got a big contract coming up, and you don't want to pay him, and that might be what it's all surrounding. Is really, it's like, well, he's good, but he's not as good as we hoped, so we don't want to pay him this big contract. We're in a position where we can draft another quarterback, and so that's the luxury that the Chicago Bears have right now. So it's not necessarily the fact that Justin Fields is a bad quarterback. And I think that kind of goes into the favor of Chicago a bit with a draft scenario, because they can look at it and be like, look at his numbers. He played well. He is definitely a starter in this league. We feel like we could get our first round back out of Justin Fields. And I don't know. I mean, it'll be interesting. I don't think that the Commanders are going to give up the heavens and the earth to bring Justin Fields in, knowing that they have to pretty much turn around and give him a big contract. I don't know if that is the best solution for the quarterback solution in Washington. Because you're going from a quarterback that, he half the year he played pretty well, but, he kind of regressed there in the latter half of the year. But in Sam Howell, you're not having to pay him this huge contract. So suddenly you're wanting to bring in another quarterback and pay him a huge contract. And honestly, I think if I was going to do that, I would probably just say, I'm just going to try to see if I can get Kirk Cousins back, because he's already been a proven top 10 quarterback in the league. He could come in and play really well, especially in an air raid offense. I think that Cousins would have a field day in that. So I don't know. There's a lot of questions about that. I think that if Washington is going to make the trade for Justin Fields, it's going to have to be a perfect scenario, a perfect trade scenario for Washington, where there is little risk and they don't give up a lot of draft capital and they don't give up any big name players. Because, here's the thing. I keep harping on this, but Adam Peters continues to say that he builds through the draft and he supplements with free agency. So if he's going to stick to that and he's going to build through the draft, why is he going to give up so much draft capital for one player? And that even applies to the notion of moving up to number one. I just don't think you move up from 2 to 1 to draft a quarterback, knowing, I guess it would be different if Caleb Williams was the only quarterback in the draft, and after him there's like nothing but third and fourth round and lighter talent. But you have other quarterbacks to choose from. Maybe they're not quite as talented, maybe they are, but they're first round talent. I'm talking about like Drake May and Jaden Daniels. You have opportunities to draft a quarterback at number 2. So you don't really need, there's not a desperation that you have to move up to number 1. Here's the other thought process with that. Knowing that you have Cliff Kingsbury now as an offensive coordinator, and while I don't know if he's necessarily going to be that slash a quarterback's coach, but I would argue you definitely need to get a good quarterback's coach in there as well. But if Cliff Kingsbury is going to help to develop whoever the quarterback's going to be, then, I mean, if he developed Caleb Williams, he's developed all these other quarterbacks, why can't he develop Drake May or, Jaden Daniels? Either one of those two. If they're already pretty good and Kingsbury can make them better, why not just go for one of those two guys? I mean, it's not like you got the number 1 draft pick. You got the number 2. And because of that, really you should probably think in more terms of, well, if I'm going to use this number 2 draft pick to actually pick a quarterback, then these are my options. I shouldn't even think that Caleb Williams is going to be available for us. And I'm not going to give up any of the other draft picks because I want to be able to develop this team. And that, I think that's the thing that people have to understand, is that it's all about developing this team, recalibrating this team is what Dan Quinn says, but also being able to keep building, because you're not going to rebuild this team completely in one off season. It's going to take a couple of off seasons to really get them where they need to be. And you can't rebuild this team if you're going to continue to give up draft picks and you're going to continue to give up maybe players. I know there's been a lot of talk about trade John Allen, because John Allen hasn't seemed to be too happy here anyway. So why keep him, trade him? And I mean, I don't know. I would rather assume keep John Allen. I think some of his regression this year came from, certainly having Montez Sweat and Chase Young leave. Now, I know that Chase Young really wasn't doing that much for us. Montez Sweat doing a lot more for us. I think he had 5.5 sacks with the Commanders before he got traded. So I do understand that really hurt his production, hurt Daron Payne's production as well. So, but I don't think I don't think we're at a point, honestly, maybe I've got rose-colored glasses or burgundy-colored glasses on, but I just don't think that you really think about breaking up the team, so to speak, and trading away all of your players. I think you have to look at guys like John Allen and Daron Payne as these are some core players on defense that I can build around, because there's not a whole lot left on that defense to build around. So why are you going to continue to stump your growth even further? And I don't think that you're going to see Dan Quinn and company being happy about trading John Allen away. Yes, it could still happen. It could definitely still happen. They may wind up doing that in the end, but I just don't think that you're going to want to do that, really. I think, honestly, if any movement happens on that second pick of the NFL draft, I think that you're going to have the Washington Commanders to trade back to pick up additional draft picks to be in a position where they could fill out that offensive line that badly needs to be rebuilt, and to solidify a quarterback. Maybe it's not those top 3 quarterbacks. Maybe it's a Bo Nix or, a Penix or somebody like that. I know that a lot of people are going to be like, nope, they are way behind the other quarterbacks. And that's true. But then again, you have Cliff Kingsbury. He's the quarterback whisperer. So maybe he's able to draft somebody like that and develop them into a top 10 quarterback in the league. Heck, maybe he can do that with Sam Howell. I mean, people have written Sam Howell off after one season, And this very same people, of course, argue the same point with EB. Like we we wrote him off after one season, didn't give him an opportunity. Same thing with Sam Howell. He didn't have an offensive line to play behind, and he struggled with that, and that's a huge thing. When you don't have a good offensive line, it's going to struggle, and it's going to be a detriment to the development of your quarterback. But people really, it's weird how it was all about not giving, Eric Bieniemy a chance, but they were the same people who said Sam Howell's trash. And I'm like, you gave him 1 year. I mean, by this logic, Peyton Manning should have never played past his first year. Jared Goff should have never played past his first year. And these are guys who were in the first round picked. And they played just as bad, if not worse, than Sam Howell. Trust me, I remember Peyton's first year. I've been around long enough to remember that. And for a lot of you that I feel like were putting Sam Howell down for his first year, you were not around apparently for the first year of Peyton Manning, because Peyton Manning was awful. And he turned things around after that first year. But that's my whole point. I'm like, who knows? With Cliff Kingsbury, I don't know why that his name I have to kind of pause and struggle with, because I guess it's the two K's, the Cliff Kingsbury. It could be like a tongue twister for me for some weird reason, but then again, the English language in general is a tongue twister for me. But overall, folks, I'll just say this. I think that if you're going to make any moves, it's going to be trading back and picking up more draft picks, because that seems to align more in the vision of what Adam Peters wants for the team. And if Dan Quinn truly is lockstep in with Adam Peters, then he's going to agree with that 100%. And other than that, folks, you're going to draft a quarterback at number 2. Honestly, it's going to be one of those two situations that's going to happen. You're not going to trade up to get Caleb Williams, and you're not likely to trade to get Justin Fields. I would be very shocked, because, again, you're going to be giving up a lot of valuable assets to get Justin Fields, and Justin Fields is good, but, can he be what Washington needs? I mean, if Chicago gave up on him, I'm not sure if he's going to be successful in Washington. There's a lot of question marks on that. He is going to wind up going somewhere that's quarterback needy. I know that much. But, and who knows, maybe in a weird sense, maybe Chicago keeps them both and says, okay, you guys are going to battle for the, number one quarterback position, which would also seem kind of odd, because come time for a new contract, don't think that I think we're at a point where Fields is up for contract, but I'm not sure. I don't think he's gotten a new one yet. Some of you folks can correct me on that, but let's say in the scenario that the case is that Justin Fields is up for the contract. Do you pay him this year? Well, I guess if you're not going to pay him this year, if you're trading him, he's still technically on the rookie contract. But if the Chicago Bears do decide to keep both, and then at the end of the year it comes time to where it's like, okay, we're going to either have to cut Fields. Well, he's a free agent, I guess, maybe, possibly. I don't know. But if they decide to cut him or trade him, I mean, I don't know. I just, as much as I feel like that the Bears have the upper hand in this, I also don't feel they do, except for the upper hand of they can draft Caleb Williams. They got choices, but Washington also has choices. They don't have to trade up, and Caleb Williams is not the only quarterback. He's a very spectacular quarterback. He's probably going to be the best quarterback in the draft. And you would like to have the best quarterback in the draft. But at the same time, if you have other quarterbacks who are really, really, really good and could turn in and develop into a top 10, maybe even top 5 quarterback in a couple of years under Kingsbury, then why not just stick with that? I mean, we would like to have the best of the best. We don't necessarily have to have the best of the best. We can have a Jaden Daniels who's going to be very exciting, very spectacular to watch. And we could also have Drake May, which I feel like a lot of people feels he's kind of dropped off, may not even be worth a number 2 pick. So there you go. It's just very interesting to see. The thing is, for Washington, you can't trade down too far and expect to still get Drake May or Jaden Daniels, because they're not going to be there past 3. Whoever's at number 2, if they traded up to number 2, is going to pick one of those quarterbacks. And I believe the Patriots are after us at number 3. They're going to pick a quarterback. So if they're picking a quarterback, then all 3 of those guys are going to be off the board 1, 2, 3 in this draft. And so then you're having to look at some of the other quarterbacks who might be able to crack the first round after the combine. And I mean, if they do that, then maybe Washington does look at, well, we could trade down and get one of those other quarterbacks and still be able to get an all-pro tackle, well, future all-pro tackle, maybe an awesome guard for the offense, another center, because we need center depth like crazy. I mean, honestly, you really need to rebuild that line. The only position on that offensive line that I feel like is locked up is that right guard position for Sam Cosmi. Sam Cosmi has been the most consistent, I think, on that offensive line. And so that position you're not too worried about, but pretty much the rest of the offensive line you have to rebuild. So Washington knows that. And if you just draft a quarterback, if you move up and you give up a lot of draft capital to get that quarterback, essentially you're not going to be addressing the offensive line in the draft. And that's going to be a problem because that quarterback's going to struggle. I don't care how much of a quarterback whisperer Kingsbury is. I don't care what type of offense we institute. If that offensive line is, in shambles, you're going to have a very difficult time developing that quarterback, and it could break them. I mean, look what it did with Patrick Ramsey back, it's been 15 years ago now? Look what it's done with, actually, it might have been 20 years ago now. Look what it's done with Sam Howell this year. So you've got to be able to have the right guys in there, and you got to build right. And I always feel like you got to build from the trenches out. And knowing that, I believe, honestly, that Washington is going to, at worst or at best, whichever way you want to look at it, they are going to just keep that number 2 pick and draft a quarterback there. They're not going to trade any of their other picks unless it's trading back and picking up more picks, or unless there's a scenario where for some weird reason one of those left tackles is still on the board and you have an opportunity to trade back into the first round to draft one of those guys. And at that point, I would trade up. After you've gotten your quarterback, then you got to get him some help up front. I would trade up to get one of those left tackles. But I don't think it's very likely that those left tackles are going to be there past pick 10. I just don't feel like that's going to happen. So, if you're trading back into the first round at pick 20 or something like that. You're trading back in to probably pick up a cornerback or somebody like that, but you're probably not going to be able to get one of those left tackles. So, folks, in the end, all these draft scenarios, know that people are going to go wild with this. I'm not giving up a king's ransom to move up to number 1. I'm also not giving up a king's ransom to get Justin Fields. I'm going to stay pat. I'm going to draft a quarterback at number 2 and be satisfied with that. And then pass there if I want to make some movements in the draft in order to move up or back to pick up some quality offensive linemen, another tight end, cornerback, somebody like that. Linebackers, we need linebackers like crazy. I'll do that, but I am not going to risk and give up draft picks because that's against the nature of Adam Peters. That is against the nature of what he's going to do to rebuild this team. And we need to start thinking more in terms of building through a draft and what that means rather than let's spend all of our money to get all in on one player who could struggle because he doesn't have any help up front. So that is my case, folks. Let me know what you think. Let me know in the comments. I know there's going to be a lot of people who feel like, yeah, we should trade up by all means necessary. I just don't think so. I realize the talent level that Caleb Williams has, but at the end of the day, how many times has this said that this has been said about other potential quarterbacks in the draft, and how many of those quarterbacks have been busts? So I don't see anybody as being a sure thing until they are actually playing in the National Football League. Until then, it's all prospects. It could be all smoke and mirrors. We don't know how well these guys are going to translate to the next level. So anyway, folks, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, again, please like and subscribe to the podcast. Support this channel on anywhere where you hear this podcast, where you're watching this podcast. And with that said, we will see you in the next episode. Thank you.